Well, hey everyone at the Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation. I'm so excited to be here. I want to thank the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Don Hawkins. I want to thank you guys for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm so honored. Whenever I first went to one of the summits back in 2014, I was just so awe-inspired by all the information and all the people who were a part of this. And everyone watching, I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this. This gives me so much hope. And as I tell my story today, I'm sure you'll understand why this gives me so much hope that people are standing up for human dignity. So just thank you. You guys are amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. So hi, my name is Aaron Crowley. I actually am a survivor of the porn industry. I was previously prostituted in the gay porn industry. And today, actually, I am an author. I just wrote a book. I just released a book called Bought with a Price, a gay Christian's memoir from porn sets to love by me, Aaron Crowley. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and about a little bit of what I talk about in the book, but specifically about what got me into the porn industry. So whenever we talk about, prostitution, sexual exploitation, a lot of the times we talk about women. And of course, in our patriarchal society, that makes a lot of sense that women would be the vast majority of those who are sexually exploited. However, sometimes I think we forget that men and LGBT plus people can also be sexually exploited. In fact, I didn't know men could be sexually exploited. In my freshman year of college, I was raped, and I did not know that it was rape because I didn't think a man could be raped. Um, what had happened is I was at a party and I got a little too drunk to where I essentially blacked out. And another guy proceeded to rape me while another guy uh, took pictures of the rape and shared them online against my consent. All of this was against my consent. However, in my mind at the time, I could not bring myself to understand that situation was rape. In fact, I thought it was normal. I thought it was a typical situation because, people say things like boys will be boys. And I've literally even heard phrases like men can't be raped. And the justification for that is men always want sex. Men can't say no to sex. And actually that's a pretty prominent um, thought in a lot of men's minds today. In fact, according to a study done on young men, sponsored by Unilever in 2017, 63% of men believe that society as a whole tells us that a real man would never say no to sex. So for me to think, to even fathom the idea that I was raped would, in a sense, make me feel less of a man. And also, being LGBT, being gay, I had heard a lot in society that gay men were always portrayed to me as promiscuous and having wild, insatiable sex. Growing up in the Bible Belt in Texas, I didn't go to church much, but being surrounded by a lot of church people, uh, I heard things about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is a story of the men of a city trying to gang rape these other two men who were actually angels disguised as men, but they were trying to gang rape these men. And people told me that's because God destroyed that city because the people were gay. And so they equated gang rape with being gay. And so all these things were mixing in my mind that men can't say no to sex, and gay men especially would never say no to sex. So in my head, I didn't think, I couldn't fathom the idea that this was rape, that I had been raped. And so what this sparked in me was two things that eventually led me into professional pornography. I was pornographed in that rape. That was essentially the first time I was in porn, was whenever I was raped. Whenever I got into the quote unquote professional side of the industry, uh, the two things that helped me that were an effect of rape was my ability to dissociate and my hypersexuality. Dissociation, as I'm sure many of you know, is I was able to essentially just kind of leave myself and just be this object, and my while my mind's going out over here and my body's being used in certain ways. Hypersexuality is, a very common way that rape survivors respond to being raped. I responded to my rape with hypersexuality because, I probably wouldn't have put it in these words back then, but how I understand it now is I was trying to regain control over a circumstance in a situation where I had no control over that situation. And so I put myself in similar situations, trying to regain control, trying to empower myself over those situations. And what eventually happened is I found myself raped multiple times. I ended up in more situations where those same situations that happened my freshman year whenever I was raped happened again and again and again, and it just caught a lot. It dehumanized me and made me feel out of control of my body. It enabled me to uh, um, dissociate more, and it caused me to go deeper and deeper and deeper into hypersexuality to the point that I eventually was prostituted in the porn industry. The Another catalyst that got me into porn was I was immensely impoverished in college. I my freshman Before my freshman year of college, my senior year of high school, some things were going on at home, and I didn't feel safe anymore. Being LGBT, I didn't feel like I was going to get the support that I needed being gay from my family, and I didn't feel safe. So I ran away from home and slept on friends' couches. And then whenever I went to college, I was housed through um, financial aid and stuff like that, but it still wasn't enough. And I needed more income to be able to pay for tuition, for the housing, and for all the other expenses that financial aid did not cover. And I found myself on a hookup app in which I was offered the opportunity to do professional porn. Uh, the 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 man who would eventually he was a talent scout, but I call him my pimp today, because he essentially he pimped me out. He bid me to people for various porn shoots, and he uh you know got me in contact, and he was essentially my manager, my agent. He was my pimp. um on the audition where I met him and he was taking pictures of me and getting me set up to be a part of the porn industry and everything, after we took some pictures, he undid his pants and pulled out his erect penis. And he said, "If you want to be a part of this industry, this is a part of it." What he was doing was sexual assault. He, as an employer, was requiring an employee to perform sexual acts in order to be employed. And he admitted this was a part of the porn industry. It was inherent. It is an essential part of how the porn industry functions. As I was standing there and he said that to me, and I'm staring at his genitals, what was subconsciously kind of going through my mind was, well, if it's going to happen to me anyways, I might as well get paid for it. I might as well get some kind of benefit from it. And so I did what he said. And that's essentially what was going on throughout my entire time in the porn industry, throughout my entire, I guess, career um, in porn. What I noticed a lot while I was in there is that a lot of the guys who were in pornography, a lot of them were in similar situations to me. I don't think many people understand um, just how uh, impacted and affected the LGBT plus community is by prostitution and pornography. Um, And here's why. According to youth.gov, up to 40% of homeless youth are LGBT plus. So some studies said like 20, but up to 40. Some other studies said 40%. Up to 40% of homeless youth are LGBT plus. Why? Because they didn't feel safe at home, so they ran away, or they were kicked out from their family who said, if you're going to be gay, if you're going to be trans, if you're a lesbian, you can't live in this house, you have to go. And so they found themselves on the street because of family rejection in one way or another. And actually, I heard this statistic first at my first summit with you guys, that according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 1 in 3 teens on the street will be lured into prostitution within the first 48 hours of leaving home. But what the National Sexual Violence Resource Center also says is that LGBT plus youth are 3 times more likely to engage in survival sex, to engage in prostitution. And this is what I heard over and over and over. This is what I saw over and over and over in the porn industry. That's the people that I quote unquote performed with. Many of them had that story. I had a bit of that story. I had many people who were sleeping on friends' couches and living in hotel rooms, and the way that they were paying for them and the way that they were surviving was through pornography and prostitution, because being young and inexperienced, they didn't have any other work skills to be able to provide for themselves. Many people, I don't think, realize how affected the trans community especially is affected by this. The National Transgender Discrimination Survey, which was done in 2015, says that trans people who lost their jobs due to discrimination against their gender identity were 3 times more likely to engage in prostitution or survival sex. And of 70%, and of prostituted trans people who were surveyed, 70% said that they experienced adverse job outcomes in the traditional workforce. So, a couple of years ago, there was discussions on, if employers had the right to terminate an employee because of their gender identity. Well, what I don't think many people on the side that said, yeah, employers have that right, understand is whenever trans people are pushed out of the traditional workforce because of their gender identity, so many of them resort to prostitution to survive. It's not because we want to, it's not because, oh, this is something fun and amazing. Like, it's because we're trying to survive. I was one of those people that you will see today who is like, oh, I'm being empowered. This is amazing. This is great. This is empowering. What was I being empowered from? I was being empowered from my trauma, or I thought I was being empowered from my trauma. See, I thought being hypersexualized, I thought being a part of all this and doing porn and prostitution, I thought it gave me control. It gave me benefit over something that I believed was happening to me anyway, that would just happen to me regardless, because I'm a man, I'm gay, this is just going to happen. I'm going to be raped. I'm going to be taken sexually advantage of. I might as well get some benefit from it. And so I was trying to have power over my trauma by engaging in further trauma, by allowing myself to be further traumatized. Whenever someone says, oh, it's empowering, what we have to ask the question, what over what? What's it empowering you over? Because the idea of empowerment, if it's empowering, that assumes that there's something that was disempowering. Now this thing's bringing you up higher. What are you being empowered over? Well, for many people, it's our patriarchal system and just the rape culture and everything that's going on. And so we're trying to get power over our trauma. But what we don't realize is that in pornography and prostitution, we're being further traumatized. We're just getting money for it. There's exact same things that happened to me whenever I was being raped. There's exact same things that happened to me whenever my pimp sexually assaulted me. All of those things were exactly what happens in the porn industry. The only difference is that there's an exchange of money, but that money is simply there to bypass the consent. That's all the money does. It is just there to bypass consent. So it's not really empowering. Look, a lot of LGBT plus people, I've heard many of them say, oh, I'm being empowered by doing this. But I just read these statistics to you. Many of us are in it because of discrimination in one way or another. So are we being empowered over discrimination, or are we giving into the discrimination and marginalization that has been put upon us? Are we giving into it because these things have pushed us out and caused us to resort to prostitution? So if those things are what's pushing us out and they're the cause, if the cause is marginalization and discrimination, how is it empowering to give into that? The truth is that it's not. It's further traumatizing. So, bottom line, what I'm trying to say, what I hope to get across is that men and LGBT plus people who resort to prostitution, pornography, they're in it for the exact same reasons that prostituted cisgender women resort to prostitution. They're desperate and vulnerable. But just like prostituted cisgender women, they're being just as traumatized. So before I close, I want to answer a couple questions that I get often whenever I tell my story, whenever I talk about this. One question that I often get is what's a good way to get people out of the industry? Well, to me, it's simple. Love them. Love them no matter what. No matter if you disagree with their gender identity or their sexual orientation, no matter what the situation is, love them. No matter if they're a man and you think no, only women are prostituted, only women can be sexually exploited, love them. Love them. Because it was essentially love that got me out of the industry. What got me out of the industry is someone looked me dead in the eye and said, Jesus loves you. And being gay and porn at the time, I was like, what? Like, the traditional idea of what I thought of Jesus from what I've seen in the church was, you know, what this man was telling me his God, his idea of the creator of the universe loved me. I didn't know I could be loved. I didn't know I was lovable at all, period. So the idea that the creator of the universe, that God loved me, that started to stir up something in my heart that transformed me. It absolutely transformed me, and I eventually left the industry and realized that I was being traumatized. Another question I often get is, what's a good way to take down the industry? Well, I've heard some rumors that there might maybe be some ideas being thrown around for a law where previously pornographed people can withdraw their consent from that porn. So like people who were like me and were in porn, that we can say, no, I no longer want my material on the internet. I no longer want that being distributed in any kind of way. I think that right there, I think that right there will be an immensely powerful tool for us to use. But here's the thing, the porn industry is going to fight that like crazy. Why? Because they know that none of us who were formerly prostituted, that none of us gave authentic consent to be in porn. None of us were enthusiastically consenting to be and do what we were doing in pornography. They're going to fight it tooth and nail. And that right there is going to be evidence enough to show what we've been talking about in this summit, that there's no authentic consent. There's no enthusiastic consent in pornography. They'll fight it tooth and nail because they know that they will lose so much material, because they know an overwhelming majority of us no longer want to be on their websites. So that's kind of all I got to share with you today. I'm so excited for this summit. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to learn from you guys, for everything you got. This stuff is awesome. Again, this gives me so much hope because there are people out there who are fighting from a diverse background. You guys are so awesome from all different places, fighting for human dignity. That is so awesome, and it gives me so much hope. So again, my name is Aaron Crowley, and if you want more information on my testimony and the information that I just provided, you can check out my book, Bought with a Price, A Gay Christian's Memoir from Porn Sets of Love. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, stuff like that. You can find several links to find it on various stores. If you go to revivalhousela.com /bought with a price. I believe the link is in my Hoova bio or whatever. So, okay. Again, I love you guys. You guys are awesome. Thanks for doing this. Thanks again for inviting me. And I'll see you guys later.